The Illuminate Arts and Faith Conference in Chattanooga, Tennessee wants to help you find your tribe. Do you get way too excited about quoting Wendell Berry or C.S. Lewis in conversations with coworkers? Does your Spotify playlist include hymns, a little jazz, and a whole lot of Andrew Peterson? Join your tribe at Illuminate March 31 and April 1 for education and inspiration from speakers Russ Ramsey, Douglas McKelvey, John Hendricks, and others. Find a complete list of session topics and ticket information at southern.edu/illuminate.
In 2024, I set out to meet as many poets as I could and spend an hour with each one. I got more than I bargained for, more insight, more clarity, more hope. It's proved to be one of the richest highlights of my life. 17 writers, 17 deeply human conversations that made me sit up and pay attention. Franz Kafka once said, if the book we're reading doesn't wake us up with a blow to the head, what are we reading for? A book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us. And that's what I hope this new book will do. I hope it wakes us up, my friends. I hope these conversations will be the catalyst for something to be reawakened, re-enchanted, and reinvigorated. It's called An Axe for the Frozen Sea, Conversations with Poets About What Matters Most. I'm Ben Palpin, and I hope you'll come and listen in as I spend a little time with poets like Lucy Shaw, Malcolm Guite, Dana Gioia, and Lee Young Lee. Pull up a chair at the table as we dig into what it means to write well and to live well. An Axe for the Frozen Sea is now available from Rabbit Room Press. Visit the store at rabbitroom.com, or better yet, ask about it at your favorite bookseller.
Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Jonathan Rogers, your host. There has never been a contemporary Christian music industry in Nashville without producer Brown Bannister. He was here from day one. Brown Bannister is a legend here in Nashville, but he's not the kind of legend one admires from a distance. He's incredibly kind and generous and just a genius at getting artists to do their best work. It's my honor to have Brown Bannister as my guest this week on the Habit Podcast. Hey, Brown Bannister, thank you so much for being on the Habit Podcast and the first ever video edition of the Habit Podcast.
Wow, this is historic.
That's right. Yeah,
it's awesome.
The first time I've got an anecdote.
Okay.
When I was in high school, I had a car with a cassette tape deck, and I was pretty proud of that. But I only had 2 or 3 cassette tapes. And one of them was Amy Grant's Age to Age. Yeah. Yes. El Shaddai and all that.
Right.
So I listened to a lot of Amy Grant because I had such a, and I didn't know, not only did I not know you were the producer, I didn't know what a producer was.
Sure.
But you, of course, you were the producer. That wasn't the first thing you produced. That wasn't her first.
No, that was my 5th album I'd done with her.
Okay. Yeah.
At that time.
But, so I was in the parking lot of the high school with my friend John. We were sitting there listening to Amy Grant in the school parking lot, or the stadium parking lot, because we weren't allowed to park in the school parking lot because we were juniors. And listening to Amy Grant, listening to, as I remember, the way I remembered it was actually the El Shaddai song, and this person knocks on my window.
Okay.
And I roll it down a little bit, and it's this very belligerent young man, and he says, "Do you remember me?" I said, "No."
And how old are you at this time?
I was a junior in high school.
Okay.
He said, "Do you remember me?" And I said, "No." And then he said, "Do you remember me?" And I said, "Well, maybe." And then he started like beating me up through the car window.
No.
Yeah. While Amy Grant is just warbling El Shaddai. And then somehow John and I both ended up outside the car getting beaten up by this guy and his brother and his cousin while Amy Grant, so like you helped produce the
soundtrack.
The soundtrack for like this terrifying moment of my life. Which, although I have to say, even at the time, I thought, if I don't like really get hurt here, this is going to be funny.
It's going to be a great story
to think about. You know, Amy Grant singing as we're getting sort of flung around the parking lot, and you know these.
That is surreal.
Isn't that funny?
Who were these people? And what did you?
It was kind of
you
a
do?
case of mistaken identity, basically.
Oh, it was?
Yeah, and who?
Perfect.
I'll tell you who these people were. One of them ended up in jail for either murder or manslaughter.
Whoa. Okay.
But anyway,
That is,
I wanted to tell somebody. I've been wanting to tell somebody ever since then.
I'm a good person to tell.
And since you had a minor role in this story.
Yeah, absolutely.
No.
I'm glad you healed.
Yeah. So you're a role model, and a mentor, and a hero to so many people creative people that I admire. And I remember something that Ben Shive told me, that he was quoting you, and I think you were quoting somebody else, but that there are people in the world who are kind of, here I am, and there are the people who say, there you are. Mm-hmm. And you're very much a there you are kind of. You seem to have embraced that as your calling, to say, it's my.
That's fair.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's fair.
Of helping other people.
Yeah.
Find their, do their best work.
Yeah.
And I'm just interested in. That's not a question. That was a statement, but.
That's okay. Well, actually, the quote, I don't know where it came from, but my oldest son, Ben, I don't even know what the context was. We might have been talking about Peter Pan, Hook, mm-hmm. That version with Robin Williams.
Yeah.
And, that scene when he's old and pudgy and got glasses and a beard and doesn't look anything like Peter Pan. And all the Lost Boys are there, and he's thinking, oh my goodness, here's all the Lost Boys, but they don't recognize him. Yeah. And then finally, they're really who is this? What's going on? And then one of them just takes off the glasses and pulls his face back so it's not wrinkled and everything. And he says, there you are, Peter, which is what a sweet moment, right? Yeah. And I think we were talking about that, and Ben said, my son Ben said, there's really two kinds of people, if you have to break it down into two kinds. Richard Rohr would not approve of that, but dualistic thinking. But there are two kinds of people in terms of how people present themselves. There's a here I am person, like you said, and there you are person. And that just really struck me, especially as it relates to, I've worked with so many artists, and, at the very sort of the essence of an artist is somebody who's going to bring this thing to the world and be center stage and in the spotlight, all of that. And even in spite of that, and maybe it's because I was working in contemporary Christian music, and they're just kind of a different motivation mm-hmm. for what we were trying to do at the time and what most of us, I would say, were about. I got to work with some amazing people. I would say Amy Grant epitomizes the there you are person as an artist. I remember my wife and I were vacationing in Florida with her family and with Amy's family, and we're just hanging out eating yogurt and just having a great conversation. And these two girls come up like, oh my gosh, it's Amy Grant. I mean, they're just really over the top. I mean, we're on we're in Seaside, mm-hmm. It's sort of out of context. And, they just go on and Debbie, my wife, said afterwards, she said, I know why God didn't make me be an artist, because I couldn't take that, mm-hmm. And afterwards she said, Amy, what is going on there? They were just I don't know, just raving over you. If there had been an altar, they would have bowed down to it. And, how do you take that, and process that? And Amy said, well, I mean, I learned a long time ago, it's not about me. It's about where they were when they heard a song that I happened to be singing, that probably somebody else wrote, or I wrote with them, that somebody else produced, that, all these other people were involved with. And it was that moment that intersection of whatever the song was and whatever was going on in their life. That's what they're really talking about. They're not talking about me.
Yeah.
And it just, that is like totally her. And we see it I see it in, other people too. But you put somebody like that in a room, in a backstage area, in a green room, in a reception, in a banquet where she's being honored, and you just watch her, and it doesn't matter how many people are there and how many people are waiting to talk to her, whoever she's talking to, she does not like look at you and then like check over the shoulder, she just doesn't do it. And I feel like it's a really special quality. I don't think it's like a technique or like, hey, I'm going to be differential. I just think it's the way she's wired. So I think there's nothing wrong with Here I Am people, because we need those too. But I think it's really interesting in context of music to be that kind of person. Like when my friend Leland Sklar, who was going to play at the Prince's Trust, famous bass player, and he's got this autograph bass with all of these famous artists that he's played for. And he's going to the Prince's Trust, and Paul McCartney is going to be there. And of course, that is the epitome of a bass player. Yeah. So he's hoping he can meet Paul, who he's never met. And he walks up to him finally in this green room reception, and he's going to say, "Sir Paul, I would love and be honored for you to sign my autograph bass. I mean, I got Phil Collins, Eric Clapton, all these people, but man, to have you on it." So he's about to say that, and Paul turns and says, "Leland Sklar, you're my favorite bass player." I mean, can you imagine that? Like, wow. Paul McCartney saying that to you? And in that sense, I think even somebody as mega as Paul McCartney, he seems like that too. If you watch different things, whether it's car karaoke or whatever, he's kind of got that deferential, there you are kind of personality too. So anyway, that was sort of the background of that.
Do you
comment.
think it's a personality, or is it something that somebody can learn?
Well, I'm a person of faith, so I believe transformation's possible. Yeah. So transformation's hard, but it's possible. And if you're thinking of other role models for a there you are person, Jesus would be a pretty good one. Yeah. So if transformation's possible, then I think people can grow into that. I do think there's a natural kind of just DNA, just wiring, Enneagram, whatever you want to call it. I think there's a natural kind of just, this is the way you're made. But I think you can grow into that. Yeah.
So you're the director of the School of Music
at Lipscomb University.
And I know you have a class where you help prepare people for a life of creative work. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Is this a topic that you...
Absolutely. Yeah. It's called Identity and Artistry. Actually, Charlie Peacock, designed the curriculum, and he had to leave because he got to feeling bad and just couldn't carry on. So they brought me in for an interim guy. And he had wonderful course descriptions, but no breadcrumbs. There was no syllabus. I didn't really know what a syllabus was until I got there. So, or that syllabi was the plural of syllabus. Right. Yeah. But it was a wonderful idea. And so I got a Bible teacher from Christ Pres Academy to come in with me. And we divided up seven modules. It's called Artistry and Identity. And the whole idea is, as an artist, as a personality, as somebody who's in a public persona, you have the public persona, and then you have the private persona. And both personas really take a remarkably different skill set to nurture. Yeah. And if you can learn how to identify what those are and nurture and care for those and bring resonance between them, then you're probably going to be less likely to go off in the ditch. A friend of mine, Brett Warren, great country songwriter, and Al Andrews from Porter's Call. Porter's Call?
Yeah.
Yeah. They have a group with some really, I mean, he won't tell me the names, but really big male country artists. Not like big, but really successful. Yeah. And it's called Prehab.
Wow.
That's
great.
Which is awesome concept.
Yeah.
So can we just address things before we get to the ditch and having to get a winch and pull you out? So that's the idea behind the artistry and identity thing. Yeah. So it's just getting young people to think about, what would it be like to be famous? How does commerciality and success, how does that play into your art? And what does it say about it? What does it not say about it? All these kind of aspects of success, failure, fear, all those kind of things. And what would it be like if you actually could do the artist thing and you weren't the center of the universe? That would be interesting. So it's a fascinating class.
Yeah. I can't remember if I heard you say this or Sarah Groves say this, because it was in a conversation you had with Sarah Groves in the Second Muse podcast, another Rabbit Room podcast.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
I highly recommend
episode,
it.
Yeah. And matter of fact, some of the anecdotes I wanted you to tell are in that episode.
Great, man.
So I was going to direct people to that to that episode. But anyway, you said, or she said, one of you are not your gift.
She said that.
Well, I can imagine you saying it too.
So profound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's such an important thing for a creative person
to be able to separate that. Yeah. Gosh, that is huge.
And I think, a plumber doesn't make the mistake of saying, my plumbing. Like if
I am my plumbing.
Yeah, I am my plumbing. Like they have sense enough to say, I got this thing I do.
Yeah.
And I've got gifts in this direction.
Yeah.
But if somebody were to say to me, hey, the plumbing you did for me is leaking, then I wouldn't think I must be a failure as a person, or I'm going to quit, or I would just go fix the plumbing,
Yeah, it's funny. That's a great analogy.
But
unless the plumber's a workaholic.
Yeah, I guess there may be some plumbers.
That built this business and it's all about that. It's possible.
It is possible, but it does seem like
less likely.
Seems a little less likely.
Yeah.
From the plumbers I know, I've known a few, and they aren't as neurotic as the creative people.
I would agree with that.
Yeah,
they're characters though.
They really are.
Yeah.
And especially since writers are always since anecdote is sort of our fuel. Plumbers come up with so many more anecdotes in a week than the rest of us do in a year.
So do you hang out with plumbers?
I mean, I have.
Is that part of how you do
It's a summer job when I was younger.
Is that part of the habit, the creative habit?
That's right, yeah. It should be.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
I got a few practitioners I could turn you on to.
Yeah. Well, okay, you have when you describe how you got into the business of producing, and as again, I have to direct our listeners to the Second Muse episode with you and Sarah Groves, where you tell some of those hilarious stories. You emphasize the fact that you were just an amateur who kind of backed your way into this job.
That might be putting it. That might be hyperbole.
It might be overstating. Yeah. But here's what I think about because I've heard you talk about what an amateur you were. But the real meaning of the word amateur is somebody who does what they do for love. They do what they do for love instead of money.
They do it for love instead of money.
Or
yeah, like I'm an amateur photographer.
Right. We use amateur as a term of abuse.
Yeah,
as a rank amateur. But the truth is,
an
amateur. I mean, etymologically, that's just a lover, a person who loves what they do.
So if I look that up, if I look up the definition, it will say that.
Yeah, if you took Latin, amela mas amat, it means I love.
Man, I should have stayed with Latin. I was going to be a doctor.
Oh yeah.
So that's when I went to college. I was pre-med. Yeah. But obviously, I didn't take the Latin
just
with
didn't
me.
Make it that far.
Yeah.
But that's what amateur means. Somebody who does what they do out of love.
Wow, I love that.
So you don't have to stop being an amateur when you start getting paid.
Yeah.
And seems like seems like you're still an amateur, even though you're at sort of at the top of that profession. You're still an amateur because you love what you do.
I do love what I do. I do love what I do. It's awesome. Never would have expected it, didn't anticipate it, didn't pursue it. But, God just kind of plops you down in something and breathes on it. And, all of a sudden there's a reason to keep going.
Yeah.
Certainly when we started, because we were the Christian, like contemporary Christian music. I don't know if that had been named yet, but it was just about that time on, like east of the Mississippi. So there was the West Coast, we were the East Coast, and or part of it, not like we were all of it. But when we were working on all those records, this is 1976, so I was probably making $2 an hour, for probably over 5 years, I made it up to like $5 or $6.
Okay.
Wasn't even minimum wage at the time, but you could not have like talked me out of it, because there was we were really part of also I was part of a kind of a revival on the corner of 16th and Grand. And the city just put up a little sign with about Christian music at Koinonia Bookstore. Really cool.
Yeah.
And Fisk University on the Black Gospel side, and it was that
I think that has your name on it.
It does, which is kind of surprising. But I was in a group called Homecoming. We played there all the time, and man, it was electric. It was electric. I mean, people were getting saved left and right. When you walked in that church, it was the same denomination I grew up in, Church of Christ. But you walk in and there's black people, white people, long-haired people, hippies, sandals, suits, Messianic Jews. I mean, you could just name it, and they were there. And it was like you could just see the building kind of like pulsing with joy. And
wow.
It was just amazing. So I don't know. I feel like that was just a really special time and time of growth for me. It's why I worked there in 72 in the inner city kind of ministry of that church. And I had 2 job offers when I got out of school to be in ministry. But my friend Chris said, just come to Nashville where you don't have a job, but you love it. And that's why I went back. And that was all part of fostering, Papa Don Finto was really a big part of fostering the creative community without even saying, I'm going to foster the creative community. We're going to serve artists. It just was so organic. And
what does that look like? I mean, you say he fosters it without consciously saying he's going to foster it.
Well, he took a lot of people that were, when Michael Smith came to town, Mike Blanton, Dan Harrell, who managed Amy, me, and the other people, Chris Harris. I mean, there were just a community of people that were musicians. And literally, he would take mainly the guys. He would take the guys and he would bring us over to his house and just like speak into our lives. He would pick up a bowl and a towel and wash our feet, literally.
Really?
Literally. I mean, he was just he is a total there you are pastor too. So, you see this kind of approach and towards life and community sort of playing out in many roles, and it was before big programs and all that kind of stuff in churches. It was small, but it was just vibrant and alive and organic and tangible and action. It was like there was action without anybody saying, "Hey, we need to take action." It just was kind of revelation, I think. So I think that really impacted me in terms of my experience in music. The only reason I was doing it, I mean, I liked it, but was to impact culture and be part of like kingdom work. That was it. And I would say even now, one of the greatest gifts I feel like God's given me is just not to be jaded. Because there were plenty of things to be jaded about. getting ripped off and not paid, and people, like Christians you're dealing with in business, not following through their word. And I mean, over and over and over again, you could find a million reasons, but man, I just always heard the stories from the artists that they would tell about letters they got, or things that would happen on the road, or whatever. So I don't know. I'm still excited about it, and I'm excited about it much broader for Christians in music with these students to be portals of light, and to be laying down the breadcrumbs to the kingdom without being religious necessarily in their content. Yeah, I kind of got off on a big sort of woo, but it's so huge for me. I mean, I was talking to some seniors yesterday, because they're graduating in December, and just about what their capstone project is. And I said, look, this is not academics. Yeah, we have to check the box, but it's not about data. It's about experience and immersion and what the craft you want to be in. And I just started speaking to each one of them about who I saw them to be, and like how important is, the music's great, find your genre, brand, all that stuff. What's your voice? What is the voice that God's given you? What are you bringing to the world? What are you saying? What can only you say? Which, another quote from Sarah, I think she said it in that podcast, is the thing I realized once I stopped feeling like competitive to do, or pressure to do better, is if you have something to say and you have found your voice, then there are enough ears to listen. I love that.
Oh, that's great.
Isn't that sweet?
So good.
So, so I'm sitting there talking to these seniors yesterday afternoon, and just tearing up because I'm so moved. I can get there. I can cry on demand if you want. I don't know what's going on with me, but it's so awesome from the very beginning with Amy and Michael and Stephen Curtis and all these people. Sorry. It's such an honor. Such an honor to just be put in a place where you're a small part of it. And where you're, man, I didn't expect this. But just that you get to see, be a part of just shepherding that process, which is, for me, it's more of a shepherding process. I'll never forget, we did that album where you got beat up on, Age to Age. That was the shift in Amy's trajectory, where she started playing arenas. And so we do that album up in the mountains, Caribou Ranch, and record this. And Smitty's like, hey, I got this idea for this song. It's Thy Word. And so we record Thy Word. And this is before the whole worship movement, big deal. And way decades. And I'll never forget going to see one of her first concerts on that tour. It was in Houston. I go into this arena, the show's already started, and she's singing, she and Smitty are up there singing Thy Word. And people are just like, it's like every hand raised, every eye closed, every head bowed. I mean, it's just spontaneous. And it was really kind of before that was cool, or accepted, that would be kind of like, whoa, you're a little radical. And to walk in and see, I don't know, 8,000, 10,000 people singing the words to Thy Word, proclaiming that God's Word actually could shed enough light on their path to show them the next step. That's humbling. Yeah. And it's very moving. And it's why I get emotional on it, about it, because I actually believe that the Holy Spirit can inhabit those ideas, and then when it drops on somebody, it's like, oh, you're ready to hear something. That happens.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm going to tell you one other story from that same album. There was I think it was the same album. Might have been Straight Ahead, the next one. I Have Decided to Follow Jesus, Michael Card song. And a friend of mine went to a conference in California. A guy from Zimbabwe was there. And he was telling his story. He did a little video for me. And he said, tell him again, I want Brown to hear this. Well, I was running from God. My mother and grandmother loved Jesus. And I was running from God and just as hard as I could. And for years, I did that. And one day I was in a market in Zimbabwe, and a song called by Amy Grant, I Have Decided to Follow Jesus, came on the intercom in his great accent. And he said, I don't know what happened, but I fell to my knees and said, I'm sorry, Lord. Now he pastors multiple churches. And you think about the power of all of our, like what you do, the Rabbit Room, all these fantastic communities of faith-filled people putting things out into the world. What the potential of it is mind-boggling. So that sort of keeps me going.
I was going to ask you, when you were talking about how that you gave me a list of good reasons to be jaded, and you said you've never been jaded, and I was going to ask you why, but I think you just answered that question, didn't you?
Yeah. I mean, when you hear Armin Morales, one of the first songs I wrote was called Praise the Lord. It was like Song of the Year by the Imperials. Russ Taff famously sang it. And we were doing this 40-year kind of reunion thing that Stan Moser put on. They were performing, did an interview with me and them. I said, hey, Armin, do y'all still sing that song? He said, every night. He kind of talks like, every night. He sees the face. But he said, every night. And I said, that's amazing. You still see the response? Yeah. Friend. And he talked about this guy that was, his wife left him. All he was left with was a chair, a table. There was a cassette player and his guns. That was all that was left. He was about to take his life. And for some reason, he pressed play on the cassette player. And it was that song, when you're up against a struggle that shatters all your dreams and your hopes have been cruelly crushed by Satan's manifested schemes. And it's just, it goes on to talk about looking up, and he didn't kill himself. He got all straightened out and everything. I mean, it's just, there are so many stories, and I'm sure you guys have talked to artists all over, or writers all over that have those anecdotes. Is that not amazing that we get to be a part of actually affecting change in somebody's life? Whether it's not committing suicide or a change of thinking, which I think what you're doing is way more in the realm of culturally shaping things and philosophically shaping things. The potential, of what you're doing is fantastic. So anyway.
Well, let's talk about you, nevertheless.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
But there you are.
Yeah.
Come on.
No. It is. I mean, I didn't know. So now we're back on There You Are. I didn't know that this was from Peter Pan. But that, I love that idea of this self that's in there.
Yeah.
And you need somebody else to say There You Are. And that's, I know that's what you do as a producer. And now that you're in education, right? I mean, producing and teaching and running this program, a lot of parallels there.
A lot of parallels, because it's all about seeing. Yeah. So what you're trying to do is see that person, that artist, that creative, that writer, and see what you see about them, because you have that more longer focal point on them, and then help shepherd them to try to see who they are and stuff, and then see what's the goal, that gold that's inside of them, because everybody has it. Even people who aren't artists and writers, they probably have a book, right? You hear that said a lot. Right. We might want to make it short, the short books in some cases, but I think it's just it is about seeing them and then just doing your best to ask better questions, ask better questions of them. Yeah. And different questions, just to to get them to go on that journey. It's really, I still feel like I'm not really, the director of a school of music. That's kind of an academic kind of title.
Right.
A dean, a director, a chair, all that stuff. I feel like I'm a shepherd of the School of Music,
Yeah.
or a producer of the School of Music, because it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
Because the other thing about being that type of person, and I didn't adopt it. I didn't say, oh, I need to be. It's just honestly the way I'm wired. But the other thing about it is in the trajectory of a career, if you are like looking for the gifts of other people, just take being a producer, you can have a lot of diversity in what you do as a producer, because it's not all about you. It's not your ideas. And we're in a world where where all these amazing talents amazing. I work with them all the time. They program, they mix, they play, they use autotune, they beat detective, and they can come out with amazing things. But there can kind of be a homogenous aspect to it, So if you're more like, no, it's not about my ideas, it's about your ideas, then you're fostering something that is really beyond what your capabilities are, which is really fun.
Yeah.
Really fun.
Yeah.
There's a lot of joy in that too.
I can imagine. I know a lot of times when people come to counselors with a problem, they don't actually know what their problem is, right? They think they're coming to deal with this problem, and the counselor says, no, you really need to deal with this other thing instead.
Yeah.
Like, we're not very good at knowing what we actually need. Do you have experiences like that in helping artists that they're trying to get through some creative block and they think they know what they need and they don't?
That's a simple answer, is
Okay.
yes. I can even attest personally, I was such a workaholic in the first 8 to 10 years, and we had 3 kids, and we all liked each other a lot. Debbie finally said, this is not really working. And she's a strong person, very loyal, and just kind of put her foot down. I always say she found a big enough 2x4 to get my attention with, but she didn't really hit me or anything. But she said, I'm not, I don't think this is really marriage as it should be. She said, but I'm not going anywhere, but I might change the locks on the door. She was serious. Like, we got to fix this. And it's funny, we went to counseling, and then she found out she was dealing with some issues that we spent about a year on. So she thought I was the problem.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and I had my own set. And I think that does parallel in artists, especially when they get stuck or kind of in turmoil, or feel like they're just not advancing, or it might be they feel competitive and they're not going as fast as the person over in that lane. I mean, all sorts of different versions of that, and I would say it's difficult to sort of like detach whatever those things that are kind of holding them back in the course of a 4-month project. But at the same time, I've really seen, just trying to shepherd that process, I've seen some fruit in just helping them think differently about something, or think about something they're not thinking about. Or, hey, let's just forget this right now. Let's chill. Let's push the pause button. And man, I think it would be awesome if you just went to the woods and took a walk and, had some time to kind of reflect on, what are we trying to accomplish here? What do you want to say? So, I think it's easy to be myopic as the creative, whatever version of creative you would want to pick. That's why Thomas Wolfe and different people. What was that editor? Max something.
Can't think of your time.
Thomas Wolfe and Ernest Hemingway, and he was the editor at the publisher for a bunch of really well-known authors, and he was so artful in navigating that, like getting somebody to detach from a 10,000 word intro to their book or whatever. So I think that's kind of a gift to do it. The thing about counselors is they don't really tell you anything.
Yeah, right.
They just ask you questions, and
yeah, that's true.
You got to figure it out still. So it is that process.
Yeah. Okay. The last question I wanted to ask you before my very last question.
Wait a minute.
The next to last question.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. Is I wonder what experience you have and what insight you have in getting a maker, right, an artist over the hump where I'm going to stop making music for what it's going to do for me, and instead I'm going to make something for other people. I'm not. There's so much heartache to be. When I'm saying I'm going to write this or make this or perform this, because I expected to do something for me. I mean, there's just almost the chance of that ending well or
not good. Yeah.
And when I think about even the name of that class, artistry and identity, I feel like surely that's part of the equation. There is getting people past that.
Yeah. It's makers, takers. Is that kind of the sort of common terminology?
I don't know that phrase, but that sounds right.
I mean, that was one of the breadcrumbs that Charlie had in his little description, and I was like, I need to. So I'm like Googling it. I can't find it. So I got to go talk to Charlie.
Yeah.
But I think I think that's one of certainly working with artists through the years. Not that I helped artists be makers and not really thinking about the reward or whatever. I mean, you try to encourage people the right way, but I don't know.
Is that not? You don't feel like that's part of your job
I do feel like it's. Yeah, I actually do feel like it's part of my job is to encourage it's that purity of craft, the purity of the story, the purity of the idea, the purity of why am I doing this? And that is in the identity issues. So yeah, I do feel like it's part of my job, actually. I just don't know that I know how to do it really well. But what I would notice as I look back over 40 some odd years of producing and lots of artists, it's interesting because I look at people like, I guess it's okay to name names, Twyla Paris, Stephen Curtis Chapman, Amy, Michael Smith, Jars of Clay. I never worked with them, but you think about the people who have had really successful careers, but they've also looked at the world much broader and said, I have this great platform and resource, and I need to serve the world, whether it's show hope, adoption or Bloodwater mission or digging wells or all of that, where they're taking what they've been given and then scaling it to help people that need help. And it's just interesting to look at the people who have had really, like in the Christian music field, who've had really long careers. Yes, the art has continued to evolve and grow, and they've developed and all of that. But almost without exception, they're involved in something bigger. It is not about themselves.
Yeah.
And so if you reel that back to young artists, it's hard. I've worked with new artists who were 14 when I started working with them. Amy was 15 and a half. I didn't make her a maker and a giver and a server. I mean, her family, is just part of her DNA. But I think, I just think it's compelling to think about what are the ways with young people, students, I'll just use students at Lipscomb in our School of Music, what are ways we can encourage them to, just like open a window to them to go, oh, wow, yeah, like I'm building this, but I see out there in the pasture that there's this other thing, just open doors. So, we're just kind of beginning in that. I think we have kind of a neat opportunity. Lipscomb, lots of mission trips happen. The engineers go build a bridge or dig a well, or this department, science department, does health stuff. And I keep thinking, well, what are like dumb old musicians? Like, we're sort of like, we don't really have any like helpful skills, do we? Well, absolutely we do. It's like unbelievable. So we're getting ready. There's this restaurant called the Cookery that we were going to start something where they sponsor homeless people off the street and teach them how to be sous chefs. And, thinking about, wow, we could go do music in the round and raise money to sponsor one of these. Yeah. It's like it's getting people to just step out this great opportunity where these veterans with PSTD, they get professional songwriters and help them write a song.
Oh, wow.
And they want to involve our students, in that sort of writing process. You imagine that? Yeah. Like as a 19-year-old, getting to see that and hear this story and see something.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of thinking about, I think we can, I guess I'm just saying, I think we can steward that and help encourage creatives to be makers.
A recurring theme in this conversation seems to me is that where, of course, art is life-giving.
Yeah.
But it's not a whole life.
Not a whole life.
And
I love that.
And when you talk about what happened to you at Belmont Church, that seems to have sustained you in your creative life for a long time.
Yeah.
It's because it was something that was a whole lot bigger than your creative life.
It was life.
It was abundant life.
Yeah, abundant life.
Yeah. All right. So the last question, and I forgot to warn you about this question.
Okay.
So, but I always ask at the end of these episodes, who are the writers or makers who make you want to do your thing? Make you want to write or make art?
It's a good question. It's a good question. It's a lot of people from a long time ago,
Yeah.
As a producer, I'm just so old school. Like the way it's like, that's my job. We have all these other people doing all the other jobs. And now it's not like that as much. And, people like Arif Mardin, and of course, George Martin, obvious. Russ Titleman. There's a lot of those. Even what's the guy that did the Dixie Chicks? Oh, Rick Rubin. Mm-hmm. Character, but he knows something that other people don't know. There's a big difference in just talking about producing. There's a big difference between a producer and what we know now as a track guy who can make all the notes and get the rhythms and all that stuff. Producer is much more holistic, its shepherd, its friend, its companion, its advisor, its counselor. It's so many, there's so many roles wrapped up in it. So I tend to think about those kind of people. There's a great story that when I was recording, can't remember, it was some Christmas album at George Martin's studio, and it's a 17th century church, 65-foot ceiling, octagonal, beautiful building, and all of a sudden the door opens and he walks in with his kind of assistant. Just wanted to meet you. He's very gracious and all of that. And we had been told, don't ask any Beatle questions. If he's around today. And then after he left, the engineer said there's a great story with Chris, I'm trying to remember the producer's name, was producing an album on U2 at that studio. And so it was like the band and full orchestra and choir in the lofts and all that kind of stuff. And he said, George came into the studio, just check on his friend, Chris, sorry, I can't remember his last name. And how's it going? And he said, man, I'm having so much trouble. Like, I'd love for you to listen to this and just help me here, And so George listened to a little bit of it, and then they stopped the tape and said, what's wrong? Or what should I do? And George said something like, well, I'm not sure exactly. As you think about it, what do you feel like is unnecessary in this picture? And anyway, left. It just kind of got him to think, solving the problem. And what the engineer said is, George is so deaf, he probably couldn't even tell what was going on. But somehow he navigated it because of those skill sets.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting. And that, to me, that's life. That's like bringing life to the situation. And it's those people who have had those really kind of, the social IQ and the navigational, psychological skills and relational skills to navigate really hard situations sometimes.
Yeah.
When your artist is crying in the vocal booth because she's doesn't like the way the session's going, and you got to go out and talk to her and go, what's wrong? And give her language for what's wrong. It's just, there's so much to it. And so when I think about being inspired, it's all those people. And then I go back and listen to all the records from the 70s, especially the 70s, 80s, 60s, 70s, 80s, because that there was an art form that was not mathematical, even though music is mathematical. It wasn't science, it wasn't fixed, it was performed, and all the technology surrounding it was, it felt natural and not so processed. So it's that whole era.
Yeah. Now, I know that you were pre-med in college.
Yeah.
And I think you would have made a great doctor, but I'm really glad that you ended up doing what you did, because there's this skill set, and not just skills, just sort of an emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
That you have, that it's great to see you using it the way you do to help people be their best. So thanks for all you've done, and thanks for being here for this.
Oh man, what an honor to be on the first one of these. You kidding me? It's awesome. It's great.
Well, thanks.
All right.
The Rabbit Room has partnered with Lipscomb University to make this podcast possible. Lipscomb has graciously given us access to their recording studio in the Center for Entertainment and Arts building. We're so grateful for their sponsorship, their encouragement, and the good work they do in Nashville. Special shout out as well to Jess Ray for letting us use her song Too Good as part of this podcast. Visit jessraymusic.com to hear more of her beautiful songs.
The Habit membership is a library of resources for writers by me, Jonathan Rogers. More importantly, The Habit is a hub of community where like-minded writers gather to discuss their work and give each other a little more courage. Find out more at thehabit.co.
This podcast was produced by The Rabbit Room, where art nourishes community and community nourishes art. All our podcasts are made possible by the generous support of our members. To learn more about us, visit rabbitroom.com, and to become a member, rabbitroom.com/donate.
If you've enjoyed this podcast episode, consider joining the Rabbit Room membership. Your membership helps sustain this community, funding everything from publishing and podcasts and theater productions to events and programs that support artists who create with a Christ-centered vision. We'd love to have you on board. Learn more at rabbitroom.com/member.